everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about how to learn languages when you have work or school. I think many of you are going to start school soon and most of you are probably working right now. And I've been receiving this question for obvious reasons. Well, if you don't know me, I'm 19, I speak 9 languages, of which 7 are really fluent, and this year I'm taking 5 C-level exams, 2 of them already successfully passed, and I'm studying abroad and I work on social media. So people are just like, how is this possible? While I understand your concern and curiosity, I think when it comes to this topic there are a lot of points that we should clarify. This video is not going to go into details of planning, productivity and organization, but I think we should rather talk about your mindset and basic steps of planning your schedule. I think you should start by deciding on what you actually want to learn and how much you want to learn. So what I see problematic here is that many of you, when you want to learn languages, who would you follow? You would follow polyglots because those people are experts in language learning. They give the best advice, they have the best resources, and they casually learn like 13 languages without making a great deal out of it. And you are right until this point. But the problematic thing is many of you start comparing yourself to these people. And this has really negative consequences. The first thing is you will get discouraged and you will start setting unrealistic goals. So you won't be really sure of your priorities. For instance, when I see a polyglot friend's stories, it's mostly like, today I woke up, in a different country of course, and then I went to uni, which happens to be in a different language, and on my way to uni I just listened to podcasts in a different language. When I came back home I read this book in another language, and people are like, oh my god, she's so successful, and they start feeling as if they're not enough. But the thing you all are missing in this situation is that this person or we just spent a lot of years in the past learning languages. When people just comment on my videos like you're just getting C-level certificates so casually every month, I'm like, yes, I know it looks like this, but I've been actively learning languages since when I'm 14. So people are just ignoring a really long history of language learning that polyglots have, and they tend to compare their own progress. Like, you just want to be at the same level as someone who spent probably their entire life on language learning. If I want to learn a new skill and if I knew someone who is really successful in that specific thing, I would just reach out to them for advice and motivation. But the point when I start to compare my own progress to their progress, which is a result of years of hard work, then at this point it's self-sabotage. And this is what many of you are unfortunately doing with language learning. So what you want to learn. You may be busy, you may have school, you may be studying at university, you may have school exams, maybe you're super busy because of your family or your work, but what do you want to learn? Just decide on this. You don't have to learn every language on earth. And even if you feel like other people can do this super easily and only you don't have time and only you are somehow unsuccessful at this is not true. I wasn't always that successful at language learning, but since I'm doing this since a really long time, I became successful over time, and right now I know how to do things. If you're just starting to learn a language just because it's useful, just because you feel like learning it, then you can't expect from yourself to have the same amount of experience as someone like who literally made language learning their personality. So just don't be harsh on yourself. To continue, I want to talk about creating a learning habit, because whenever you want to get a new skill, the thing that you should do is actually creating some time working on this specific thing. And when it comes to languages, I think that's crucial. So let's suppose that you have some free time in the mornings, or right after when you come from work, when you come from school, or you feel more productive in the evenings. These specific times that you're going to determine in a day can be super useful for you to create a language learning routine, because language learning has actually two sides. Like, from one perspective, you should actually sit and study things intensively. You should learn from books, from YouTube videos, from a language course, and from the other side, you should be listening, you should be talking to people, you should be practicing on your own, you should be creating new things in that language. But you can't do this side before studying, because if you don't know anything, how are you going to do all that? So even if you don't have a lot of time, like, I'm not expecting you to have 5 hours every day to study Spanish, because not everyone can have this considering the обстоятельства in real life, okay? But even 1 or 2 hours that you can spend daily on language learning are going to be super useful. I'm gonna give a personal example here. I have a Russian C1 exam in 2 days. Take a moment to imagine the amount of stress and confusion that I might be experiencing right now. This week I already took 2 German classes. Why? Why would you do that when you have to spend all of your time on Russian when you're super busy and stressed? Why would you do that? Because thinking of this, like taking a German class takes only 1 hour. Let's imagine that I prepared for the class or I revised for the class, then it's going to take 2 hours. As someone who gets distracted a lot, I already waste this time during my day watching TikToks or just doing nothing. But when I start to use my time more reasonably, then I realize that I can actually spend 1 hour on a German class, even if it's not my utmost priority right now. As I mentioned my German class, I want to talk about Lingoda's back to school campaign because, as you know, I'm studying C1 German on Lingoda. Lingoda is an online language school where you can learn these languages with native level teachers and with a lot of opportunity to speak about many different topics.
Ein Saugroboter ist schon intelligent, wenn eine Aufgabe übernimmt? Oder gehört da mehr dazu?
Ja, also heutzutage künstliche Intelligenz, also der Begriff bezieht sich auf, wenn Maschinen Dinge für uns erledigen. Und in dem Fall von einem Staubsauger, sagt man, ja, also das kann man gar nicht als intelligent beschreiben, sondern als, so dass es für diese konkrete Aufgabe evaluiert wird, aber nicht evaluiert. Also Evolution ist von sich selbst.
Konstruiert?
Ja, vielleicht. Das Algorithmus unsere Entscheidungstreffenfähigkeit quasi übergenommen hat.
Die Entscheidungsfindung, ja.
Ja.
Why I chose to mention Lingoda in this video is that they have different learning plans for every kind of schedule that you might have. So if you want to be more flexible in your language learning, or if you just want to make a solid routine out of this and if you want to be more regular, or if you just want to take 2 months of your life and you really want to focus on a language and just boost your language level. As an advanced German learner, I just think it's really cool that I have the flexibility and I can take a C1 German class whenever I feel like. So I think Lingoda can help you to become more regular in your language learning process. If you'd like to try it, use my code ICLALIANO or the link in the description, so you are getting 20 euros of discount or its equivalent in another currency. And if you sign up for Lingoda Flex, you can get up to 20 free classes, so I think check it out. Another thing I want to mention is that you should plan ahead. If you have some free time, if you have weekends, if you have some holidays, you should be spending at least a little part of those free times for your language learning. As a student, I mostly hated high school, like classes, people, and so whenever I had free time, I would just entirely dedicate this time to learn languages, learn about something that I want, watch movies that I want to watch, or read books that I always want to read. So the free time that I had was like the biggest blessing for me in my life. And I guess I was 16 when lockdown started, so when I found out that I wasn't going to go to school for 2 weeks, I was like, okay, I'm going to use the time in the best way possible. So in lockdown, I just started learning Italian, then after 2 months or something, I started learning Spanish. And then I realized that next school year was also going to be online, so I started learning German and Russian. So basically lockdown is a thing that made me a polyglot. So whenever you have free time because of your weekends, because of your holidays or summer holidays or the time that you have between semesters and everything, use this time super wisely. If you don't have that much of free time, something you can do is creating specific days on which you are focusing on a specific skill. Like on Mondays you can study grammar, and then on the other days of week you're just doing other more fun things. Or you can just spend your weekends on listening or speaking practice or talking to friends. For example, in the evenings mostly I call my friends and I help them with Turkish, they help me with Russian, like we just have these phone calls. So you can just decide on which time of the day or on which days of the week you're going to do specific tasks. This point is maybe not relevant for many of you here, but I still want to mention it in my video because I think it can help us to gain new perspectives. My personal opinion is that you can, in some ways, associate language learning and your work or studies. Right now I'm studying political science in Italy, and pretty much at every university in Europe you can study in English or in the local language. Well, I could have studied political science in English, which would be a lot easier, right? Because last year I just thought that, like, if I studied my major in Italian, after 3 years I would almost have the proficiency of a native. And studying political science in Italian would help me to be super familiar with this field in Spanish and French as well. And in some way it could actually reduce the amount of attention that I was going to give to Italian, so that whenever I want to study languages I could actually study other languages, because in Italian I'm already studying other stuff. So I think instead of studying in your native language or in English, if you know another language, you can try studying in that language. I know it requires a lot of dedication and a really high language level, but if your language level and language goals just correspond to this, I think that's a great option that you can consider. Another thing is, if you're an international student, I just suppose that there are a lot of other international students around you, which is not my case because I'm studying with Italians, like I'm surrounded by them, and Italian practice with Italian students is not really what I'm looking for. But if I studied in English, I would have a lot of friends from other countries with which I could actively practice languages at school every day. Like, I would have French friends, German friends, I would have Spanish speaking friends, and imagine the amount of language speaking. You can just adapt the same situation to your work. Or some of my friends, when they are working part-time, they actually choose jobs in which they can use their language skills, like a call center or some customer service in which you would have to talk to people in English or in another language that you're learning. So this would once again reduce the amount of time that you have to dedicate to studying. But also, as a student, I think there are still 1,000 of ways to link your studies to language learning, because you can always read related books, watch related documentaries, or just follow Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts. Because studying political science in Italian, I read books about it in French, I took speaking classes about similar topics in German, or I watched things, I followed Instagram accounts in other languages. Like, you can still find a way to associate what you have to do with what you want to do. Next point I'm going to mention is passive learning, basically integrating languages into every aspect of your life. This can cover everything, I guess, like listening to podcasts, watching Netflix series, or listening to music. Basically, whenever you're doing something else, just still being somehow connected to the language that you're learning. Right now I'm living with my family, but when I was in Milan, I was living alone, and the whole time I was basically listening to something. And my favorite podcast languages were Russian and Swedish. Russian because it's always interesting to listen to people, and I can just grab some conversation topics from the podcast and I can discuss them with my friends. And Swedish because I don't understand most of it and it's just like a background noise, and it helps me with my pronunciation to listen to all those people speaking. Or for example, let's say that you're learning 3 languages and you are working on 2 of them, but one of them you have to like kind of ghost because you don't have enough time to study the 3rd one. Well, in this case, I would just choose a Netflix series or something and then watch an episode every day or every 2 days, so I would still be in some way connected to this language. This summer I mostly had to study Russian, but since my next language exam, probably in like 2 months, is going to be a German one, I don't want to completely ignore German, so I followed a lot of German accounts, I still kept listening to stuff in German, I kept taking German classes once in a while. So it's just important that you also, even if not truly actively, it's important that I think you're still somehow connected to language. And it's a lot easier to do this if you're learning like 2 or 3 languages and not 17, okay? And sometimes when I take a little break from studying a language and then when I go back to studying, I realize a huge improvement in my skills, most especially my accent and way of speaking, like just how I just explain my thoughts, or how I don't know if this word exists in English, but nuancing, like making those subtle differences between the things that you say, like speaking in a more specific way. Whenever I just take a break from studying, I realize these improvements in my language skills overall, because during my breaks I'm mostly listening, more natural content, and I'm in a process of passive learning, which really helps you to internalize everything that you have learned during studying. And my last point is, please don't be a perfectionist, especially when it comes to language learning. You're, in most of the cases, going to be your biggest enemy. Recently I was feeling that my German level has always remained the same for like past 2 years or something. But then I saw a picture of my German notes from August 2023 and I was like, are you serious that I was learning this? Like right now it's just like a super common sense information to me, and I was literally learning that kind of vocabulary, that kind of expressions, and I was just learning it for the first time. But right now it's super like I can use them every day in my conversations. When you're still in the process of doing something, mostly you won't realize how much you're progressing, and I think language learning is one of the areas where we can see this super clearly. So just be aware of the fact that fluency takes time. Even babies start speaking after like 3 years, and even after that with the most basic words. So you can be easier on yourself and you can take your time to study and enjoy things that you're doing. I hope this video was helpful and enlightening. If you have any concerns, you can just leave a comment. Follow me on Instagram to get a more regular insight of my language learning process. And while you're watching this video, I will probably have found out the results of my Russian exam. You can check once again my Instagram to see if I passed, because that's my biggest concern right now. Like, I literally have a Russian exam in less than 48 hours. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to pass it.